Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for the Elevate Finance Virtual Summit sponsored by Tipalti. My name is Anand Mishra, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Tipalti. So just to provide you a quick background, so we run these on-site events over the past few years across the country in different cities, Dallas, San Diego, New York, Boston, etc., and had an excellent response from the attendees. And the goal of these events is to get finance professionals such as yourselves together in a small and intimate environment, in this case, a virtual environment, and talk about some of the challenges and again hear from folks like yourselves on how they are scaling and modernizing their financial operations. The one difference this time around is due to the increased concern about the coronavirus outbreak, we've decided to change this to a virtual format. And when the situation improves, hopefully shortly, we will return to the on-site event format. So here's the agenda for today. After a quick round of introductions, I will touch upon a few of the challenges that the discipline of finance faces today. After that, I will hand it over to Scott Olson, Tipalti's Director of Customer Marketing, who will interview our expert panelists, Laura Wensley, Controller of Fandom, which is a global entertainment media brand, and Julia Farquharson, Corporate Controller at TuneIn, an online media company, both very cool brands. And Laura and Julia will share their stories and provide insights into how they've automated and modernized their payables operations. This will be followed by a live demo by a solution consultant, Nick Fischler, and we will also hear from Nick Poisson, pre-sales consultant from Procurify, and Procurify is one of our key partners, and as the name suggests, they provide procurement solutions. Please enter your questions on the chat on the left-hand side of your screen, and we will answer them towards the end. So let's kick it off. So the role of finance has broadened over the past decade or so, and this is not new to anyone. So beyond the core responsibilities of accounting, bookkeeping, financial reporting, FP&A, closing the books, etc., finance leaders are playing a much more prominent role in strategic activities across the company, in M&A, globalization, development and improvement initiatives, and a whole lot more. CFOs have also become prominent as the voice of the company in communications with investors and with the board as well. And suffice it to say that the role has broadened significantly and become more strategic, over the past decade and slightly longer. The problem is that the back-end processes are still manual and take a lot of effort to get done. In fact, I would say that there are a lot more effort needs to, and manual processes happens now because of things such as the gig economy, different business models, vendors and suppliers which are spread globally, frequent changes in tax, compliance, rules, regulations, etc. Especially if you look at the accounts payable, which is the number one most time-consuming function in finance, and that is according to the Institute of Finance and Management. And that stands generally in the way of finance modernizing, automating, and getting to the higher standard of doing more strategic tasks. So our take is that this most time-consuming function in finance can be automated relatively quickly, and I would say easily, like a machine with the current technology that's available out there. So at Tipalti, we look at the payables process holistically, not just the payments piece or the invoice piece, the end-to-end function, and we automate it. So as you grow and become more global, adding multiple subsidiaries across different companies and different countries with global tax, regulatory, compliance, fraud, risks, etc. to deal with Tipalti, you won't have to deal with all this because we handle that at the back end for you. And that's where the payable transformation comes in. So many finance teams are modernizing the way they manage the payables operations. And the reason they're doing it is to help their companies scale and be more efficient while also balancing that with risk and compliance changes. So having provided a bit of context on the challenges facing finance, I wanted to give you a quick overview about the Tipalti platform. So this is the wheel or the whirlpool, as you know, and this I position it as the Tipalti's philosophy. And the reason I do that is because if you put a robust platform or a system in place now, you will not outgrow it as you grow. So it starts with the supplier management, with supplier onboarding, with 26,000 rules built in to validate and ensure that the data is almost pristine in most cases. We also have a KPMG certified tax compliance engine wherein we collect W-8 and W-9s, and we have simplified the tax collection process with the digitized tax form capture and then do the TIN validation and tax ID collection across 50 different countries. We also have a very robust invoice processing system with OCR capabilities built in, with machine learning and artificial intelligence to fill in the gaps if the OCR does not capture it. And for folks who need 2- and 3-way PO matching, we have built into the system as well. And talking about global payment, we are a licensed money transmitter. Basically, we can send money to 190 countries in 120 currencies across 6 different payment methods, and we do sanction screening so that you don't pay bad actors who are in a list somewhere, AML or OFAC list or a terrorist watch list somewhere. And we have a robust reporting and reconciliation system. We provide at least 20 reports out of the box with the AP solution, and we integrate directly with ERP systems such as NetSuite, Intact, and QuickBooks Online. And what that does is basically with the real-time reconciliation with your ERP systems, it significantly reduces the invoice, or I would say the closing time, basically closing the books itself in many cases, and you'll see some examples as we go along. And then NetNow is our early payment system, and basically what that does is you can pay suppliers faster without any workload on your part and without it affecting your working capital. And lastly, it's all built on the Tipalti platform, which ensures proper financial controls and compliance. So here is a sample list of our customers, ranging from fast-growing companies to established startups across different industries that are benefiting from Tipalti. So our customer satisfaction rate and our customer retention rate is over 98%, which is by far the best in the industry. And the additional ROI that we provide is basically cutting 80% of your payables workload with the current technology that we have, and reduction in payment errors by over 66% with the intelligent data capture and the compliance and the rules that are built in to ensure that the information that you collect, including the payment information from the suppliers, is accurate. And then with the real-time reconciliation with your ERP system, you can close the books at least 25% faster. And here are some specific ROI case examples of the customers that we have. So Touch of Modern, basically, which is a men's fashion company, went from over 6 million in payments to about 150 million without adding to any AP resources. And Zola, which is a wedding registry company handling 100 million in payments, kept their staff at 2 instead of 10 as they had projected as they grew. And if you look at Foursquare, which is a location technology platform, they accelerated the financial close by 16 days per month. And Docker, which is another technology platform or virtualization platform, reduced their AP workload by over 80%, or 87%, I should say, and they accelerated the monthly close process by 25%. So next you will hear from Laura and Julia on how they have benefited from automating their payables operations. And with that, I would like to hand it to Scott for the panel interview.
All right, thanks, Anand. Good afternoon, everybody. Really appreciate you guys joining us here today. My name's Scott Olson. I'm Director of Customer Marketing with Tipalti, and I've spent the majority of my career in software that's been aimed at streamlining and improving decision-making for finance and operations. And I'm excited to be joined here today by 2 leaders who really have transformed their financial operations for success, and that is with Laura and Julia. They are both helping lead really innovative businesses, and they've got very interesting business models. And so we're very appreciative for them to join today. So I'll do a little intro of the 2 of you. Don't blush too much. And then we'll jump into our conversation. And folks, if you're out there and you have a question as we're talking to these panelists, you can use our chat question panel, and we'll get to those questions at the end of our webcast today. Laura Wensley. Let's meet Laura from Fandom. She's a CPA and she's corporate controller at Fandom, which is a global entertainment media brand powered by fan passion. Fandom has your pop culture curiosities covered through fan expert knowledge and curated content. Their global audience of 200 million monthly unique visitors encompasses over 400,000 fan communities. And Fandom features over 55 million pages of content. Earlier in her career, Laura led functions at PwC for 7.5 years. And Julia, also a CPA, is corporate controller at TuneIn, one of the most widely used streaming audio platforms in the world with millions of monthly active users. They broadcast over 100,000 radio stations globally, and they've got 5.7 million podcasts on the platform. And it's available for free across 200 platforms and connected devices. Prior to TuneIn, Julia led accounting functions at PwC and Deloitte. So Julia, Laura, welcome. Laura, to kick things off, starting with you, I gave a little intro there, but really, please introduce yourself and tell us a little more about Fandom and your role there.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for that introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm corporate controller at Fandom. And you talked about our business, but I think what's relevant here is understanding the finance department and kind of what we do. And so our role is overseeing the management of our entities. We have about 12 entities located around the world. We have 350 employees plus another 100 or so contractors. And again, they're located across Canada, Mexico, U.S., Poland, London, Japan, Australia, and a few other places around the world.
Yeah, wow, you're dealing with multiple entities and a global company that you are. Mm-hmm. All right, well, Julia, we'd like to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about TuneIn and your role there.
Sure, thank you. Happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the corporate controller here at TuneIn. I've been here for about 2.5 years. My role consists of, operations, treasury, forecasting, strategy, although I'm sure Laura can relate when, the reality of it is I'm kind of a Jill of all trades. So really it's the controllership touches on every wing of the business, and you're interfacing constantly with business partners throughout the entire organization. As you mentioned, TuneIn is a digital radio streaming company. It lets you access what would otherwise be terrestrial local radio stations from all over the world, wherever you are, and on any of your connected devices or mobile or on the web. The mission of TuneIn is to reinvent radio for a connected world, and I love that. It really speaks to me. The company's goal is to create a sense of community in our global environment and really allow people to feel connected through the magic that is audio and radio.
Yes, very cool. Julia, sticking with you on this one, how did you get into this career role in finance?
I think, honestly, I have a bit of a genetic predisposition. Almost everyone in my family is either a chartered accountant in Canada or otherwise works in finance somewhere else around the globe. So I tried to fight it and ended up kind of slipping into this role regardless because I found it so interesting. When I was in university, I loved my global strategy courses. I loved that the skills that I was learning in finance were applicable to any industry, and it was really giving me the financial tool set to be able to apply, consulting and advice to any type of different company that I was working with, which is great. I started out my career at Deloitte in Vancouver, Canada, as an auditor, as many do, and working towards my CPA there. And then a few years ago, I decided to move down to the Bay Area, started working in deals consulting at PwC, and then after a career chock full of client service, I finally decided that I wanted to try out an industry role and start taking some of my own advice. And that was when I landed at TuneIn.
All right. Laura, how about you? How did you get into your career role here in finance?
Well, it's very interesting listening to Julia because we have some similarities in that I also trained in Vancouver, Canada through PwC and wanted to work in the startup world. And so came down here. I've been working with startups for about 5 years after leaving PwC and worked for a couple of years with a really small startup in logistics in Vancouver, and then moved down to work with an e-commerce startup in San Francisco, and then moved on to a real estate technology startup, and now in a media startup. Unlike Julia, though, I have none of my family comes from the accounting background. They're all in healthcare. And so for me, I was a little bit of a black sheep. And I never thought I'd stay in accounting and finance. But what I quickly learned to also love the strategy and being involved in decisions, being able to see all aspects of the organization, and being seen sort of as a leader in the company when it comes to making sound business decisions and providing business advice.
Excellent. Julia, back to you. Tell us a little bit about the business model at TuneIn.
Sure. So at TuneIn, we have what we like to call the freemium model, which speaks to the two sides of our revenue-generating activities. So one side is our ad-supported model, where any of the users who are downloading our app, accessing through the web, or otherwise on their connected devices will be served ads as part of their experience when they're listening to international radio stations. We then work to upsell those users by luring them in with some of our premium content, such as our live Big League Sports and commercial-free news products. And we would engage them to subscribe, and they would get a commercial-free experience after that. So we really find that the free users transitioning into a subscription is all part of the same funnel, and we really, we need both sides of that funnel in order to be able to effectively monetize our user base.
Mm-hmm. And Laura, same question with Fandom and a global multi-entity kind of company. Very interesting. What is the business model there for your revenue?
Yeah, about 80% of our revenue comes from other businesses who are looking to advertise on Fandom. We have both a direct and an indirect sales channels. And then the other 20% of our business comes from our e-commerce sites. So we own Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, Futhead, Mutthead, and just to talk a little bit more about Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, that was actually a passion project about 3 or 4 years ago, where some of our now employees were interested in building out tools for people to play Dungeons & Dragons using virtual tools online. So rather than having physical books, they created digital books, and we were able to create those tools and get the license from Dungeons & Dragons to produce that, and that's now become a significant chunk of our business.
Wow, interesting. Laura, sticking with you on this one. Tell us about the role of finance there in helping you guys monetize and helping your mission there at Fandom.
Yeah, I see finance primarily as providing kind of the underlying data for the organization when it comes to making financial decisions. Finance can be, there's 3 functions. There's the treasury, there's accounting, and there's the FP&A. And finance in general, through all of those three functions is able to maintain the financial health of the organization. We have a good look at everything that's happening in order to make decisions. And then for us, what's important in our kind of accounting and treasury role is making sure that we are producing reliable financial information as quickly as possible, and then getting that information into the fingertips of the people that can make business decisions, and then helping them point out trends, helping them understand, where, if there's anything that's can help them with decisions around sales or around purchasing, and identifying kind of key business metrics for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Julia, interested in hearing your thoughts on the role of finance in helping the TuneIn mission.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything that Laura mentioned there. We're really tasked with providing the business, and particularly, people that don't ordinarily work in finance or are trained in finance, with a sense of financial transparency. They need to understand the data, so really providing the context and the analysis around the numbers is one of the most critical things that we do. And to Laura's point, the speed at which we can present that information and in a clear way to decision makers is absolutely critical to how quickly we can operate our business and make those decisions that are going to drive strategy. The only other thing I would add is we're the gatekeepers, right? We have to protect the profitability and sustainability of the business. We need to be able to forecast accurately, and then we need to be able to optimize our tools, processes, and people to make sure that we're hitting those forecasts and we're reacting quickly enough to misses on the top line to protect the bottom line. And that's definitely a core function of our team.
Yes. Let's get into the financial operations at your companies when we start to see things that build up and become challenging. Laura, describe what was happening when you guys realized that payments and accounts payable operations were becoming a challenge.
Yeah, so I started with Fandom about a year ago, and I'd been used to using automated tools for a while to manage payments. I think that they've got advantages over tracking approvals and ensuring that information is coded properly and moves quickly, and there's just a lot of visibility into making sure we're properly accruing at month end. In Fandom at the time, we had a great system that worked for the company, but it was all manual. And so looking at this, it was difficult. While the system worked, we were able to, we had all the backups stored. There was a process. There was a lot of organization. It relied heavily on people as opposed to relying on systems to be efficient and automated. And that's where we started looking around for solutions. And because Tipalti does international payments and management so well, this also had the added benefit for us moving to Tipalti in the last year. Had the added benefit of us centralizing our payments globally, and so we are able to cut down on costs for compliance of accountants, third-party accountants in a lot of our regions around the world, such as Germany, Japan, Australia, Mexico, and Canada. And so that's been really helpful for us.
All right. Julia, same question. What was happening there when accounts payable operations was becoming difficult?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I had encountered was basically that there was a bunch of tech debt. The answer to historically not having enough people or time was that TuneIn had adopted a series of disparate systems and combining those with a bunch of manual processes on top, and none of the systems were speaking to each other, unfortunately. So I think the assessment that I did when I got there was, not only do we not need any more systems, but we need to figure out what are the right systems and make sure that they're fully integrated and, speaking to NetSuite, which is our ERP. And yeah, that was not an easy task to get everything straightened out and streamlined, but something like Tipalti was incredibly helpful for us to tackle one of our payments challenges, which is paying international radio stations and publishers and broadcasters. We were using one system for our domestic payments, ACH and check, one system to send international wires, and then we were also running manual payments through PayPal to a few of the small radio station partners. And then everything had to be reconciled and re-reconciled. And then it was like a close your eyes and cross your fingers if you're going to get your ending cash right after sending out the high volume of payments that we were. So we loved that Tipalti was able to bring all of our payments under one umbrella and then also integrate the compliance component. So it really saves our AP group a ton of time in having to track down that information. It gives me the peace of mind that we're compliant, and it allows us to have one system to provide all of the reporting that we need on all of our cash flow.
Interesting. Laura, back to you. Can you describe your payables operations today, how it's working, and who are you paying out there globally? And there's a couple of processes people have that we found at Tipalti. There's kind of a mass payments payout process, and then there's the AP with invoices. And I just describe your operations today and how it's working.
Yeah, we like to primarily use the AP with invoices to track approvals. And most of it's general business expenses, rent, third-party contractors, network and hosting. And these vendors are located internationally as well as across the U.S.
All right, and they're sending you guys invoices, and how's that flow for you now?
The flow works great. So the process is the invoices can either they come through to our general AP at fandom.com email address and then get pushed into Tipalti and through their OCR technology, or they even, some vendors just push straight through Tipalti. The initial coding is done, is automated, and then our AP clerk takes a look at the invoice, double checks everything, makes adjustments if needed, and then sends along to our business partners, the vendor managers. We get the approvals that we need. Once the approvals come back, we do a final check of the invoice and the coding before payment, and we have multiple signatures out, multiple approvals out on the payment side as well.
All right. And Julia, how about you? Tell us about the scope of TuneIn's payment processes there and how it's flowing today.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like TuneIn pays everyone and everything, but we have a significant volume of partners that we're paying. Typically, our operating payments, as Laura mentioned, are paid through traditional invoicing that go through the OCR process, but we've also got a high volume of partners under our revenue sharing agreement. Basically, when we sell ads against another party's content on our platform, we would then give them a fixed margin cut, which is entirely calculated and self-reported and then self-paid. So we would use mass pay for something like that going forward, which is really exciting and expect to save us a ton of time just based on, the high volume of payouts that needs to be calculated, reviewed, and then shipped out to all of our vendors. I would say in terms of process, we start out with, a budget review, is the spend in budget, then legal would review any contracts or commitments, and then it's as easy as setting up the new vendor. We just get their email address, they self-register, they own all of their data, they input their information, their tax information is automatically reviewed for legitimacy to make sure that it's entered correctly. That saves us a ton of time around 1099 season when we don't have to be chasing documents from our vendors. And then really they just ship out their invoices electronically whenever they need to. to our customized TuneIn payments address. And and then it goes through the OCR process, and we get an extra set of eyes on it to review before it goes out to the business to approve the spend. So it's super seamless. Everything's in one place, and it's much easier to use than what we were doing in the past.
All right, and you touched on the onboarding part of the process. Laura, tell us your perspective on the importance of onboarding vendors in a compliant way, and you guys have global vendors as well. And how was it getting them to a new invoicing kind of way with you guys?
It was actually interesting how most vendors were willing to sign on and really excited about it. I think they really appreciate the automatic notifications, so they know exactly when things are being paid. They have the payment information goes out, so they know how to apply invoices. And on our end, our AP clerk has really appreciated the whole collection of W-9 information or W-8 information. He's found that to be kind of a dream for him. So, yeah.
All right. Julia, tell me about the other benefits you're seeing now that you guys are kind of early on, but what are some of the benefits that you're seeing early there streamlining your payments?
Yeah, I would say financial transparency, and also just the aggregation of having all of our payments, whether they're international or domestic, or any different type of payment transmission format, they're all in one place. So that's super helpful for me. I love how easy the reporting is in Tipalti. I'm able to run real-time reporting, which wasn't available in our prior system. It was on a 2 to 3 day lag. I feel really confident in our cash control and treasury, and also in our accruals process at the end of the month, to know that every transaction is getting picked up, that we've accounted for everything. So the financial transparency is definitely one. We've touched on the compliance side of the house, but just reducing the time spent by our accounting analyst in collecting tax forms. She really has no way of validating those when they're coming in. So to be able to get ahead of that before we go into 1099 season is super, super helpful, and gives me a lot of peace of mind knowing that I don't need to necessarily be going in and reperforming that validation check every single time we have a new vendor, because we onboard vendors, in high volume and pretty rapidly, just based on the amount of content that we have. And then I would say the last benefit is happy users. Every other system that I've had to implement related to our financial processes that impacts the rest of the business has been painful, drawn out. People are confused. They don't understand the terminology, or the user interface is too complex to find what they need. And people love the fact that we can send out approvals via email, and the PDF of the invoice is attached. That's something that I think is super unique to Tipalti, and has really, increased the scrutiny of review on those invoices. So I feel better. We're getting more questions from the business, challenging invoices, saying, this looks too high, or this isn't correct, or and I think that we're actually catching a lot more from that perspective as well, and leading us to fewer corrections down the line.
Interesting. Laura, how about you? Is there some other benefits you're seeing? You've been up and running now for a little while.
Yeah, I think Julia pretty much summarized it all. One thing I would add to that is the implication of happy users is also increased trust in finance and accounting. We get less questions back from within our organization, as well as from vendors. Everybody knows what's going to happen. The consistency and the reliance on technology is provides people with this level of trust that enables them to know that we've got it. And that to me is important when it comes, and allows us to kind of do our job, and then providing back information to people that in a timely way. I think is, back to that point, has been fairly good at building out finance as a strategic function at Fandom.
All right. Julia, here's a question for you. In closing our discussion here today, what's next for you and the team now that your payables operations are streamlined and improved?
Yeah, I mean, I think that once with this, significant distraction and time that kind of moved out of the way, we can really focus on operations that are going to drive the business forward. So we actually don't have a dedicated AR specialist, for example. Our accounting analyst works on both AR and AP, although with the squeaky wheel getting the grease, historically, 70 to 80% of her time was spent on corresponding with vendors, working to get their, bank information changed, for example, getting their tax documents, going back and forth, giving them information about when they were going to get paid. And we've now been able to flip the script and dedicate a significantly larger amount of her time onto AR and collections, which really improves the cash flow of our business and has allowed us to significantly reduce our time to collect on our revenue streams. So I would say from a treasury standpoint, we've really been able to get ahead of that and allow for more operational flexibility.
Great. And a question for Laura, slightly different. For everyone here that's looking at a payables transformation, what advice do you have now that you've gone through this, or what perspective do you have that you would relay to folks?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of technology out there, and every piece of technology does things slightly different. My preference is understanding what the technology's core competency is, and then looking at configuration rather than customization. And so being able to find the technology that fits your business, and then instead of asking that technology to bend around your business, to be able to say, okay, why was this built this way? What is it that perhaps we are doing in our business that we could change in order to ensure that we're operating under best practice? And you hope that you were finding the technology that encourages you to consider best practices around finance.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you, too. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm going to now turn the audio over to Nick Fischler, who is a solution consultant here with Tipalti.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Fischler. I'm a solutions consultant here at Tipalti, and I'm going to be taking you through a quick demonstration of the Topology Platform. I'm just going to plug in my computer real fast here. Okay. So before we get going here, just a real quick overview of the Topology Platform, kind of the direction that we're going to. So today we're going to touch on the supplier and vendor management. Then we're going to go into invoice processing, how we're able to do approval workflows, PO matching, things along those lines. Then we'll get into payments, and finally we'll finish up with some pieces on reconciliation. To start with the vendor management, the reason why we start the demos with supplier management is that we just believe it's best practice to start with clean information up front. We run into a lot of customers where when we first meet them, they're really struggling with collecting accurate payment details, with collecting the right tax forms up front. Maybe they get to the end of the tax season and they realize that they're missing a whole bunch of W-8s or W-9s. And we want to avoid those sorts of problems and eliminate those sorts of problems before they ever really exist. And so the way that we're going to do that is through a self-service white-labeled portal. So self-service in that we're actually going to have the vendor or the partner onboard themselves, and white-labeled in that this can all look and feel like your business, your branding, your logo, etc. Now, we have two different flavors of this portal that we can provide. One is a iframe that can be embedded directly into your platform. And that's what I'm showing on your screens here right now. And the second is the Tipalti hosted portal. That's a more stand-up, ready-to-go onboarding portal that's hosted by Tipalti that you're going to invite vendors to onboard onto. And I'll be walking you through that one today. But I did just want to touch briefly on this iframe experience here. So when we meet a lot of our customers, they might already have a platform or experience for their partners, for their vendors, etc. And so we can actually embed our onboarding process. You can see here on the screen this easy three-step process of address, payment method, and tax form directly into their experience. So you can see here that we are living as a very small part of, in this case, Tapjoy's overall experience here. So you can see that we're living as a little sub-tab and as payment history and payment information, and then this box that I've outlined in red, it shows you the actual iframe itself. Now, across the two flavors of our portal, this onboarding process is going to remain the same, and that's what I'll really be walking you through today from an onboarding perspective. So address, payment method, and tax forms. Before I do that, though, just real quickly, wanted to touch on the white labeled nature of this portal. You can see that Tapjoy can look very different than GoDaddy here, and that can look very different than an Infolinks or a Event Pixel. So keep in mind that this can really look and feel like your business, have the same attitude as your business. Now, the other flavor of the portal I mentioned is one that we will invite a vendor to. And just before we get there, let me just introduce you to the Tipalti AP Hub. This is going to be your kind of one-stop shop for everything payables related. So this is where you and your finance or accounting team is going to be living within Tipalti. From here, you can do your invoice processing, your payments, vendor management, etc., all from a single place. But I mentioned that we're going to start here with the vendor onboarding, and we're going to invite a vendor to onboard. Looks like I just got logged out here. Let me log back in. We're going to invite this vendor to onboard with a very easy click of a button with this add me here. And we're going to need a few pieces of info. The real one that we really need is this email address. This is where we're going to be sending this invite to. You can see that we can set up a default entity for this vendor, as well as a language preference for this vendor. We're going to invite to supplier portal and add. That's going to kick off an email invite to that vendor. So this again is all going to be white labeled like I mentioned before, so even the email communications are going to be looking like they're coming from, in this case, our fictitious demo company, Eversky. Whenever you see Eversky throughout this demo, just think your branding, your logo, etc. Now when the vendor is ready, they can click into the link. It'll take them into this portal here. They'll create a login, which I've already done, just so you don't have to watch me do that process. And you can see, again, that easy three-step process that I showed you with the iframe version of the portal. Now, we've broken this onboarding process up into these bite-sized chunks just to streamline the process and make it as easy as possible for that vendor to onboard. In this first tab, we're going to be doing things like OFAC screening, so bumping all this information up against sanctions lists, blacklists, or its watch lists. We just want to make sure that you're not paying anybody that you shouldn't be paying. This is also going to drive the payment methods that are available on this next tab. So you'll see that because I've, in this case, chosen as a vendor that I'm based in the US, that's going to drive the payment methods that we see on this next tab here. So when I click into the next tab, you'll see that ACH, for example, is a payment method here. If I said that I, as the vendor, was based in France instead, ACH would disappear, you'd see something else. You can see that we have this nice list of different payment methods. We can pay out in 6 different payment methods across 120 different currencies and 190 countries. And this is, I think, what really our speakers spoke to this a little bit earlier, is this really allows you to pay anywhere in the world and scale your business internationally. Right? You don't have to worry about what information or what payment details are needed for each country, because Tipalti has your back in that regard. We also are not just going to be collecting details here, but we're actually going to be vetting them as well. So we have over 26,000 validation rules built into the system to make sure that we're collecting clean information. So again, trying to eliminate those payment errors up front. So if I type in a routing code, for example, that isn't valid, the system gives me automatic feedback saying, hey, this isn't a valid routing number. Once I change it to my Bank of America routing code, that error message goes away. So we're really trying to put that onus onto the vendor to provide clean info. Now, just for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to move on here to tax forms. And what we've done here is we've partnered with KPMG to create a digitized tax form collection system. Now, for U.S. companies, that's going to be collecting W-8s and W-9s. For internationally based companies, we can also collect tax IDs and VAT IDs in about 60 countries. I'll just give you a quick glance at the W-9 form here. You can see that it's a digitized version of the W-9 form that we're collecting here. And we're even able to do TIN validation here as well, so bumping the EIN along with the name that they provide here up against the IRS database to ensure that those match. Now, once they finish this onboarding process, this vendor is going to be marked payable within the system, but this is also going to now be a tool that they can come back to. They have 24-hour, 7 days a week access to this portal. They can use it as a tool in the future. So instead of reaching out to your accountant and bugging them with questions like, hey, I need to change my banking details, they can just come in here and do it themselves. Same thing with payment remittance advice, right? Instead of calling your team up saying, hey, when's my payment coming, they can just come into the portal and see if a payment's been scheduled, see if it's already been paid, or maybe it didn't ever come. They're also going to receive proactive email communications, which I think one of our speakers spoke to earlier. So, for example, if a payment is processed, getting a note that says, hey, you've been paid X, Y, and Z amount for such and such invoice. Now, I know that I'm going a little bit fast here. We do have like a certain time limit that we're supposed to meet here. If I haven't answered one of your questions throughout this demonstration here, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help answer any questions that you guys have. But I did want to at least save some time to touch on how we're going to process invoices and payments through the system here. Now, kind of Anand had mentioned and Scott had mentioned that we have kind of 2 workflows that we support within the system. The more traditional AP route that is invoice-backed, where a vendor might send a PDF invoice into your AP team. It's processed for approval and paid out. And we also have what we describe at Tipalti as our mass payment workflow as well. It's a little bit more non-traditional, but is big with digital economies, where you might not be receiving a invoice from a partner or an affiliate or a publisher, for example. And then instead, you have some sort of back-end system that is calculating out how much is owed to each one of these partners. So you can instead, for those individuals, feed us a file, and we can process those payments based on those payment instructions. Focus right now on the invoice processing piece of this. There's a few ways to get an invoice into the system. Vendors can send it into an email inbox. That's probably the most common way that it's done. For example, maybe in this case, an invoices@eversky.com. They could send it in via snail mail, and it can be scanned into the system and uploaded. Or they can actually even use that portal that I showed you a moment ago to upload the invoice here as well. Once an invoice is in the system, they're going to end up in this pending review tab here. And I can click into each invoice, and you'll see this PDF of the invoice pop up here. And we're going to use OCR technology to capture all the information on this page, right? The invoice number, the date, etc. We're also going to be able to mirror all of the fields that you might have in your ERP system. So department, project, amortization schedules, whatever fields you're using, just know that we can mirror them within the system here. In addition to the OCR technology that we use, we also have a managed services team that can help ensure the accuracy of the information captured. Lastly, I want to touch on this page is the approval workflow here. So we can set up an approval workflow based on machine learning. The system can learn different trends and rules over time. So, for example, if a invoice every time is being allocated to marketing, has to go to a certain individual. Or maybe every time an invoice comes in for CloudCom here, has to go to a certain workflow like you see here. That can just be auto-populated, but it's very flexible, right? So I can edit this. Maybe I want Dave to be the first approver here, add somebody new on the fly. Once I'm happy with the approval workflow, I can submit for approval, and there's two ways to approve within the system. I can approve via the UI, and approve in mass, so maybe I want to select these all and approve them all at once. Drill in for more detail as well. And this is going to be more for your accounting department, finance team, etc. The other way that we can approve within the system is via email. And this is really great for department heads, C-suite members, etc., where they can receive emails like so. And this is what one of the speakers was mentioning before as well, where we just want to streamline this approval process as much as possible. They see line level detail. They see a history of who's already approved it, who's going to approve it next. They see an invoice that they can click into, and then really simple buttons. So they never have to even log into the Tipalti system. This can all be done from email, which means you can do it from your phone. Once the invoice is approved, it's going to end up in this pending payment tab here. I think it's also really good to note that in addition to this invoice processing that I just showed you, we also can do PO matching as well, both two-way and three-way matching, which I think Procurify will touch on briefly as well. Lastly, let's just touch real briefly on payments. So now that we have all these invoices approved, I can click through them all. Let's say that I wanted to pay out all these 10 bills. I can hit pay bills here. Pay out on a cycle, so once a week or once a month, or decide maybe to pay on a specific date. So maybe I want to pay these all on the 26th. When I prepare these payments, that's going to batch these 10 bills together and push them into this Payments tab here. And in this Payments tab, this is where you really get to see Tipalti's power as a payment processor. You can click into each batch, so I just clicked into a batch of 17, and you can see here that we're paying across different vendor IDs, so these are all different vendors within the system, different currencies, and different payment methods. It's all from one place, so it makes the, it kind of centralizes the overall payment experience. You don't have to log into different banks and upload different files for different currencies or different payment methods, etc. We do have a final financial control in place here that we can click approve on for your C-suite members, controllers, etc. And then the last piece here is you'd fund Tipalti the needed amount, which will show you in this Funds Required tab, and process your payments out to your various vendors. Now, one other thing that I'll just point out before I turn this back over to Anand is that mass payments workflow. This is a lot easier. Like I mentioned before, it's just going to be feeding us payment instructions. You can feed us a CSV file, basically telling us who to pay, how much to pay them, and when to pay them, and just select any old CSV file, load it into the system, and your payments are ready to go. This is a really scalable system. It could be a one-off payment. It could be hundreds, or we have customers that even do thousands of payments in a single batch. So with that being said, I want to switch this back over to Anand here, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Nick. Given the short time frame that we had, that was an excellent overview. And I would like to actually invite now Nick from Procurify to present his solution.
For sure, and thanks everybody. This is the second Nick and the third Canadian on this call, so thank you for helping me feel comfortable. Yeah, so thanks Tipalti for inviting us today. The comment was made earlier about core competencies, and this is why Procurify partnering with Tipalti was such a no-brainer. Tipalti is all about helping companies get more nimble and more strategic around bills and payments. Procurify is all about helping companies get more nimble and more strategic around purchasing. So as Nick mentioned a moment ago, really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is feed good, clean purchase order data into your ERP and then help Tipalti get it. And so as you see there on this slide, one of our big goals is to get out in front of things like this. Anyone who's worked in finance has had a bill come across their desk that you're like, where the heck did this come from? And so Procurify tries to proactively stop these kinds of things. Now, and by the way, we will be sending out mouse pads with this printed on it to everybody attending today. So keep an eye out for those. Now, if we could go to the next slide there, really the secret sauce of Procurify is all about a philosophy that we call spend culture. And so what that means is that we believe it's possible for finance teams to, yes, you got to be the gatekeeper, but really we want you to be viewed within your company as someone who helps enable things, that helps their teams get things done. We all spend a lot of money on engineers, on developers, on scientists. We want to free up their time so they can do more of those value-added activities you hired them to do, and less time filling out requisition forms, filling out purchase orders, being hounded because they have there was a phantom invoice. We want to let them do what they're hired to do. And then the other piece of spend culture, of course, is maybe helping your team get the data that they're looking for so that they can take a moment and think about, hey, how does this purchase fit into our overall strategic vision or our company culture? Now, if we want to just go to the next slide really quickly, here's a few quotes from some of our clients. So on the one extreme, ASCO Aerospace, as you can imagine in aerospace, they really very process-heavy purchasing. And what they liked about Procurify is that we could get up and running quickly. ASCO has also told us that we've cut down the time to make a PO by 80%. And then we've got Cenex on the other extreme that we really just help them build out a process. And now quickly to end on the last slide here, our contact info is on the last slide. So feel free to give either myself or my colleague Tori a shout. And if this concept of spend culture resonates with you, or you'd like to learn more about Procurify, or frankly, if you just want to have more than one of those where the F did this come from mouse pads. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Nick. That was really short but sweet, I should say. And we are at the top of the hour. I apologize that we are not going to be able to get to the Q&A section, but we have answered a few questions on the chat. But I assure you that somebody from Tipalti will respond to all the questions. And please, fill out the survey that you will receive at the end of this when you log out. And I want to thank everybody today for the presenters, especially Laura, Julia, and Nick from Procurify, and then Nick Fischler for a very compelling demo, and Scott for moderating the panel. And thank you, everyone, and appreciate your time today, and stay safe. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks.